Hello, everyone, and welcome on into a championship week Tuesday college basketball preview with myself, Joe Tansey, and Mark Henry Jr. riding in the, I won't say the catbird seat. You're side by side. We're cohorts in this. With 5 automatic bids going out tonight. Not going to hit too many of those games because there's just been some crazy upsets throughout the mid-major conference tournament slate. Gonzaga St. Mary's is the big one tonight in the WCC for about the 25th year in a row. They're playing each other for an automatic bid, even though both teams are in the tournament. And major conference tournaments started today with some of the play-in games or first round games, whatever you want to call them. Mark and I have been scouring through the futures board to find our best bets, as well as some plays for tomorrow, because tomorrow's lines are already up for the games that are set over at DraftKings Sportsbook. Mark, I'll start with this. Look, Gonzaga St. Mary's is the headliner tonight. If you're a bid stealer or a team on the bubble, you got to be happy there's no bid stealer in the WCC.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And I think the focus on Gonzaga St. Mary's is something we kind of talked about last week is, man, Gonzaga, we didn't talk about them all year. We kind of threw the towel in on them at some points. They're ranked 17th in the AP right now. You look at KenPom, and they're all the way up to 15. And if they beat St. Mary's in this game, that's only going to go up. Like, are we getting into territory where Gonzaga could be on like the 5 line, like maybe the 6 line conservatively? But I look at some of the teams on the 4, the 5, the 6 line. Like, there's no way in the world that you can convince me South Carolina is better than Gonzaga.
Not at this point.
No, there's no way you can convince me Florida is better than Gonzaga. I don't know if you can convince me that Alabama is better than Gonzaga. Maybe not even, there's a lot of teams in the SEC that I'm kind of a little bit side-eyeing of, but I've talked a lot about it on my show with Ryan Coyle this week on Saturday, that I think this is going to be a tournament where the 11, 12s, and 13s run wild, because some of those 4, 5, 6s, I mean, Illinois is another one. They've been like the 133rd defense over the last 2 months. Like,
have been playing better of late. I know you're not an Illinois guy,
but they make me sick because
you have a list. I think it's like 5 or 6 teams right now, and rightfully so. You got a list. I'll give Illinois like the slightest bit of credit. They've been playing decent of late.
They're so talented. I can't take away. I mean, they're still 4th in KenPom offense. Like, they're still a really talented team. There's just, the defense has been so bad, and the late game point guard situation scares me. But it's hard to deny when they're good, they're among the best in the country. So there's just those teams that I think are really kind of vulnerable. But if you can see a team like Gonzaga play their way up to that 4 to 5 to 6, I generally like having someone in that range make a deep run in my bracket. I had it with Miami. I think K-State was a 3, but they were almost treated like a 4 or 5 with how little they were talked about going into the tournament. I like having someone in that middle tier. I'm kind of struggling to see who that would be for me right now. Gonzaga, they go out and win tonight and look good doing it, I think they're that team for me.
They're going to be a very popular pick when the brackets come out, especially if they're below a 4. That's going to be very dangerous for a lot of teams. You think you'll see them on the top of the list of teams no one wants to play.
Oh, if you're a 1 seed and Gonzaga's a 5 in your bracket, what a night. Or even worse, if you're a 3 seed, and they're a 6, what a nightmare in the second round.
That would be pretty awful. 4 other bids being handed out tonight. The CAA between Charleston and Stony Brook gave out Charleston a plus 140 to win the CAA yesterday. That looks pretty safe. They're a 10-point favorite against Stony Brook, who has to win their 4th game in 4 days to beat Charleston, and Charleston's a 10-point favorite. So that's probably the only play I have on the board tonight, and we're holding it over from yesterday. The Horizon League, Milwaukee, the 6 seed. A lot of people have caught on to Milwaukee and their offense and how well they've been playing of late. They are a 4-point underdog in Indianapolis against Oakland tonight, looking to get back to the tournament for the first time in a while, I believe the Golden Grizzlies are. The NEC is Merrimack against Wagner, and then the Summit League is Denver and their high-powered offense against South Dakota State, a team we've seen in March Madness with the Dominator. Mike Daum in previous years that have captured our hearts. Any of those teams with any potential to pull off an upset in March Madness if they win tonight?
I gotta be honest. I'm kind of stretching. Wagner Merrimack, that'll be a 16, if not
Yes.
maybe if not maybe a 15, but probably a 16. Milwaukee, Oakland, that's probably a 15. Charleston, I imagine, will be one of those popular, maybe 12, 13 seeds.
Mm-hmm.
I don't. When I've watched them, like I watched that Towson game a little bit, didn't walk away all that impressed. I mean, they won the game. That's all that really mattered. But they kind of had to come from behind to do it. I'm not a big Charleston guy comparatively to I think how they'll be talked about. Depends on the seed that they get. But I'll say this: this is not. I don't know what the seed will be for the Summit League with Denver being 17 and 16. They'll be a bad seed, I'm sure, if they win. And South Dakota State, even with them, they'll probably be a 14 at best. Denver has a guy in Tommy Bruner who averages like 24.2 points per game. He can really fill it up. So, maybe if you're a 2 seed that gets them as a 15, and that's got to be annoying. But
he's a good story. He's going to be the good story for a half on like Thursday afternoon. If Denver.
Yeah, I don't have much otherwise on these other teams. Not a great slate tonight.
It feels like the NEC usually around the 15, 16 seed. FDU was that. Summit League, look, you said with Denver, I mean, I feel like 15 is a right spot. If Milwaukee beats Oakland, they got to be a 15, 16 because they had a horrible start to the season, have come on late. And Charleston, I think out of the 4 non-West Coast finals tonight, they would be the highest seed of all, and I expect them to take care of business. So pretty straightforward tonight when it comes to those 4 more bids along with the West Coast. So 5 bids punched. I don't think we've seen any bids. Well, we've seen 1 bid stealer in Drake. So let's now move forward to tomorrow and the rest of the week now, Mark. To start with the tournament conversation before we get into the futures, look, the bubble is pretty cut and dry at this point. Indiana State, a lot of people just sentimentally want them in because they've been a much better team all season long than anybody else that's on the bubble right now, whether you're talking Virginia, anybody in the Big East. It feels like that's the consensus. Numbers-wise, it gets a little hairy because they really haven't played anybody, but then again, that's maybe not their fault because who wanted to play them? That's the catch-22 you have when the NCAA tournament committee sits down for that. But to look at now the power conferences, I don't think there's any bid stealers in the big ones. I think the 2, and I talked about this with John Jansen earlier today, the 2 conferences the bubble teams all have to worry about are the A10 and the AAC.
Yeah, the A10's interesting. The A10 is, I can see any of 5 teams winning it. And the bubble, yeah, I mean, I'm totally an Indiana State guy compared to some of these other teams, as you could probably guess by how I've talked about the bubble. I mean, Indiana State's 43rd in Ken Pom, Virginia 67th. That, to me, I think Indiana State, you could use your eyeballs, and everyone would tell you that Indiana State's a better team than Virginia is, at least at this point of the season. I'm St. John's. I think Colorado, I think those teams should be in compared to, I mean, they're St. John's 31st, Colorado 27th. It really comes down to Virginia and Indiana State I mean, right now Lunardi has them in as the last 2 teams, but I don't think any of the teams after that, Texas A&M, New Mexico, Wake Forest, Villanova, Pitt, Iowa, Providence, like I'm not feeling like those teams really have much of a chance unless you go deep into your conference tournament. Maybe Villanova, if they can pull off a couple wins, if you can beat a Creighton, but I think we're kind of locked in. And unfortunately, unless there's a bid stealer, I think Virginia will get in.
So with the bid stealers, the A10, and this, let's talk about a team that you and I both like in VCU. They're obviously on the outside looking in. The only way the A10 gets multiple teams in at this point is if anybody other than Dayton wins the conference tournament. Richmond has fallen off of late. VCU, the 5 seed in this tournament, has to win 4 and 4 to get to the automatic bid, but Dayton is very comfortably in a position to make the NCAA tournament. So, look, we both like VCU. I think maybe you a little more than me, but why is VCU a team to watch out in the A10?
I just like how the bracket broke for VCU. The bracket broke out so that they play they're playing Fordham, who beat Davidson today. I feel good about that. They're actually, I'll just give a pick away for tomorrow because it's not one of my favorites anyway. I do like VCU -7.5 there. I think
I will ride because I watched the end of that Davidson Fordham game. It went to overtime and Fordham was losing pretty much the entire game. So yeah, I honestly would probably take VCU up to 10 at that point.
Yeah, I agree with that. I had it up to double digits, and VCU whipped Fordham on the road. This is obviously neutral court. Fordham coming off of a comeback win, overtime. You have to imagine, little emotional win to get to the next day. They're also just the far worse team. So I really like VCU -7.5 there. Then they move on to UMass in a rare 4-5 game where I think they'll be heavily favored again against UMass there, probably by like 5-6 points, I'd guess. And then you get to a point where they have a win over Richmond. They have I should say they have wins over Richmond, Loyola, Dayton, UMass, and Duquesne. So the other like top 5 teams in the A10, VCU has wins against those teams. So you have to feel good against about their chances in the A10 just progressing. And you have to feel better about the fact, even though we are both high on the Richmond Spiders, I feel like they've lost a little bit of steam down the stretch here. They kind of took themselves out of the bubble conversation with a couple tough losses. I think Loyola was a tough loss in there. Maybe George Mason.
The loss to George Mason on Saturday was pretty brutal.
Yeah, that was definitely a bet that I had. Those two were tough losses for Richmond, but you'd rather be on the Richmond side of the bracket than the Dayton side of the bracket.
I agree. And Loyola Chicago has been playing some pretty good basketball as well. They're the 3 seed. Sure. So I think it's important when you look at these futures, you have to look at where they are in the bracket as well. I mean, and look, the NCAA tournament's that way too, in some respects, where the bracket falls for a certain team actually ends up benefiting them. So I agree with you. I think VCU and Richmond are in pretty good shape. I rate them both over UMass. But yeah, look, VCU Richmond's going to be a toss-up. That's a rivalry game. It's a toss-up. They're both pretty much level teams. It'd be a fantastic game to watch in a tournament semifinal on Saturday. But that's a game I think a lot of people should be watching. And look, I think Dayton Loyola, if it breaks that way, would be a fantastic game as well.
By the way, I didn't realize this until I was in Richmond. VCU is in Richmond, so it's very close. It's like 5 minutes away, campus to campus.
Kind of like Cincinnati Xavier. It's very they don't like each other whatsoever. Those numbers not up right now because St. Louis, Rhode Island going on, but I believe VCU has been in around 500, 700
I have no free ads. I got them at 1,100 earlier on this week, plus 1,100, but I have seen it settle on other books around 700.
Okay. I'd probably still take them as long as they were above 500. I think
I agree with
pretty
that.
Good spot. Real quick about the American. Florida Atlantic's in the tournament. 100% locked in. Do you think that affects them at all going into this tournament where their bigger aspirations are the NCAA tournament? They've kind of been on cruise control in certain games throughout the season. And you have a number 1 seed in South Florida who's been pretty darn good in conference play. Memphis is lurking there. Charlotte's kind of done the same thing Richmond did over the last few weeks. They haven't been great. But there's enough talent in the AAC where Florida Atlantic's not a deadbolt lock to win the tournament. And in turn, that winner becomes a bid stealer. I'm going to ride with South Florida. I've been riding with South Florida all season long since at least since the turn of the calendar. They've been playing incredible basketball. I think they know this is the only way they get into the tournament.
That's what I was going to ask you.
I think that's kind of it's a motivation thing at this point. You've been playing so well, and I don't know and I think there's a selection committee this year for the NIT, so you're not guaranteed to be in there as well. I'm trusting my gut here with what I've seen with South Florida throughout American play. Memphis has been too inconsistent. Charlotte's fallen off of late, and I think FAU is going to be on cruise control waiting to get to next week.
I laid off this conference. There's a lot of conferences I kind of threw my hands up and I'm like, yeah, it's probably going to be USF and FAU at the end. And at that point, maybe I'll kind of make my bet based on the spread of that game, based on what I've seen in the conference tournament. But I could see either of those teams walking away with it. And the FAU motivation factor is a real thing. It really is.
Yeah. And look, it's not like it's just popping up for a conference tournament. This is something that's been pretty much there for FAU for parts of the season. They're winning games, but they're not doing it in like 20, 25-point fashions like Gonzaga used to do all the time when they were the top dog in the WCC. This is a team that's on cruise control. They have bigger goals, and which is okay. I'm totally okay with that. But I just feel like South Florida is going to be way more motivated for that to happen. We mentioned the bubble. We got to mention the Big East because that is where the bubble basically will get broken down. St. John's and Seton Hall will play what's a de facto elimination game on Thursday in the quarterfinal. Providence is going to beat Georgetown. I'm not breaking any news to you. They're an 11-point favorite. Villanova is a whopping 23-point favorite against DePaul tomorrow in the late game. I think Villanova has the better path to the semifinals because Marquette's been dealing with injury. Tyler Kolek's been out for a week now with an oblique injury. I think Creighton is the only team that could beat UConn in New York, and I'm still very skeptical of that. Where do you see the Big East shaking out, and can an upset happen on Thursday, whether it be from Providence or Villanova?
Yeah, I think Villanova is where you have to look at it. I think Creighton-Villanova determines my opinion of the bracket. I think the winner of that game will go on to the final. I don't think Marquette is going to go all out here. I think there's a chance you don't see Kolek, or you see Kolek in limited capacity. So I think it ends up being Creighton-Villanova kind of deciding that end of the bracket. I ended up going with Creighton plus 425, just I thought it was a pretty good value. I feel pretty good about their chances to get to the final. And then you've got Creighton plus 425 against UConn, a UConn team that will absolutely be locked in to a 1 seed. And at that point, does it really matter, the Big East championship for them? And maybe even they get knocked off on the other side of the bracket. So that's definitely that's where I went with it. If I was to obviously take that shot, it would be with Villanova, which is down there at 16-1. If that was more like 25-1, I would probably take the shot. But 16-1,
I don't feel confident whatsoever in Villanova.
I don't feel confident in their coaching. I'll be quite honest. You look at
the other coaches.
Yeah, you look at the other coaches at the top here, and I feel a lot better with Hurley, with Shaka, with McDermott, with Pitino, with Shaheen Holloway, who has an argument for Coach of the Year. I've heard this year, which that wouldn't be where I'd go. But even some of these, I think Neptune's in the bottom in terms. Even Thad Matta, I think that he's kind of towards the bottom here in terms of the best coaches in the Big East. That's without getting into Georgetown.
And I mean, look, Eric Dixon and Justin Moore can absolutely will this team, but at some point it does come down to coaching too. And when you have this just incredible list of coaches in the Big East, it's really hard to kind of stack up Villanova with them. I will say I would probably lean betting Villanova as a dog on Thursday against Marquette. And the reason why I do that is because even if Tyler Kolek plays, he's probably going to be on a little bit of a restriction. Marquette's bigger goals lie in March Madness. I think there's going to be just a little bit of hesitation from Marquette, and maybe that opens the door for Villanova. But even then, Villanova's got to execute. And you can't come out with a slow start like they did against Creighton. If they play like they did in the second half against Creighton for 40 minutes, we probably aren't here talking about Villanova right now. Honestly, the conversation may not be happening. They may be on the right side of the bubble ahead of Indiana State, but we're not. And they've blown every chance that they've had to solidify a bid in the field of 68. And they're probably going to end up in Dayton if they make it, which is it kind of just says it all about Villanova basketball at this point.
Yeah, I don't think there's much more to say. I do have a fun play in terms of Philadelphia basketball. If you go over to the gross Atlantic 10 into, I think it's the 7-10 matchup. Let me double check here.
I believe it's the 8-9.
8-9.
Yes.
Yeah, 8-9, 11:30 in the morning. So
I love that, by the way. There's going to be no one but friends and family in Brooklyn tomorrow morning for that.
Oh, I love it. I absolutely love it. You're going to hear a pin drop in that stadium there. And initially, I liked the over at 137 here in St. Joe's George Mason. You look at some of the numbers there, it tells you St. Joe's been pretty good to the over. But I dove a little bit deeper into it, and you look at the spread here. It's George Mason by 1, total at 137. You do some math there on what the team total is going to be, and St. Joe's is probably going to be around the 67.5 in terms of their team total. They have scored 68 plus in 4 of their last 5 games, but more importantly, 22 of their last 25 and 26 of their 31 games this year. So they are a terrible, terrible defense. But 67.5 is too low when you scored 68 plus in 26 of your 31 games. I'm no mathematician, but that's a high percentage. So they also scored 75 against George Mason earlier on this season. So I just think that's too low. I get that sometimes these conference tournament games, especially in the morning, do go a little bit under. I know that's a big thing that Big Cat from Barstool likes to bet on, these 11:30 conference tournament week unders, but he loses money every year. So I kind of
I'm done on that too, because I bet the under 130 in Notre Dame, Georgia Tech, and see where that's gotten me today. Absolutely nowhere. So
and St. Joe's has 5 guys averaging 11 plus. Like they also have another guy averaging 8. Like they have great offense. They just, they can't defend.
Can't play like a defense, which is okay. No. We call it we here call it the Wright State problem.
By the way, let's pour one out for Wright State. And speaking of that, like we should almost do a segment on that. Like things we're sad to lose.
Or do like an in memoriam for teams we love to bet each season.
Yeah, maybe that's something that needs to wait until the conference tournament week is like fully over. But Missouri, there's a chance we don't have them for much longer to fade.
Yes.
Because tomorrow Missouri plays Georgia, and somehow, some way, the odds makers have given us an easy way to fade Missouri again.
I'm gonna stop you for a second on Missouri, only because I bet LSU on Saturday, okay? I'll give Missouri this. They haven't played well all season, but they fight. I'm not saying 3-point is massive here, but they fight. I had LSU 7.5, and we were coasting in the second half, Mark. They were up 20 points. Like I bet LSU money line at halftime. I knew exactly, boom, Missouri's not going to do this for 2 halves. They almost won that game. I'm not saying they're going to beat Georgia. I'm not saying they're going to cover the 3, but all I'll say with this warning with Missouri is they're actually playing with pride, unlike some of these other schmuck teams that are just waiting for their coaches to be fired. That's all I'll say with Missouri. I'll give you the warning, but I don't disagree with Georgia -3.
And a weird trend I usually like with these conference tournament games, and I know like past results don't always dictate future results, but I like when a team beat another team on the road. Like Georgia beat Missouri in Missouri by 7 as a 5-point dog. Now they're playing on a neutral court. Probably will be more Georgia fans there. Probably won't be many fans on either side. 9:30 game, 9:30 tip. Probably, I don't know where this is being played. Nashville, so an 8:30 tip. So still a late tip out there in Nashville. People are getting ready to go out to the bar. So I don't know if they're worried about 8-23 Missouri going up against 16-15 Georgia. I don't know if Georgia's traveling that many people. But
did you see the Siena Niagara game tonight? I think it's like a 9:30 tip in Atlantic City in the MAC, and everybody's doing the over under on when it'll actually start, because they do the women's and the men's tournament in Atlantic City, and it's just like a 6-11 matchup in the MAC inside Boardwalk Hall.
That's brutal. That's brutal. I love that, actually.
But you know what? When there's going to be things on. By the way, I just need you as emotional support. NC State has somehow gotten up 10 with 16 seconds left, and Louisville has the ball. We talk about bad teams. I just want to go on a rant for a second, because I've been on the bad side of this all day long. West Virginia, bad team. Got lost by like 30 points to Cincinnati on Saturday. Was up until about like the 10-minute mark, and then Lukosius from Cincinnati gets super hot. I got lucky. I live bet Cincinnati, but man, stressful. And then the corpse of Jim Boeheim, by the way, is on my screen. He is awful as an announcer. Like he sounds like a sleepy Bill Raftery.
He's bad.
It's not great. Jim just needs to go and like watch the game. ESPN doesn't need to drag him onto ACC Network. But Louisville, who hasn't shown fight all season long, Kenny Payne is, the second he steps off the floor, he's getting fired. And they somehow showed fight tonight. So beware. This goes back to Missouri. Beware of these teams. They may not be completely dead. And I say that and watch Georgia's going to win by 20 tomorrow. That's how it's going to go.
I'm rolling with the dogs. One last fade of Missouri. One last time, hopefully.
Is Vanderbilt playing tomorrow as well?
They are, and I actually have a play on that game. It's Vanderbilt, Arkansas. I like the over.
That will be up and down. That will be fun.
148.5. I was surprised it wasn't up like to the almost like the mid 150s. They played earlier this year 85-82. Like these teams, Arkansas's 10-1 to the over in their last 11 games. Missouri 4-1 in their last 5 games. I think this number should be higher, so I like that number at 148.5.
Yeah, I think Muss is going to have that team compete. That's a team that won't quit. Maybe they'll pick off a second win in the SEC turn. They're definitely going to beat Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt's dead and gone. I would probably take Arkansas with the 6 and the over. I think that's a pretty decent play for tomorrow. I say that now. I've had a really awful Wednesday. It's not even Wednesday. It's Tuesday afternoon track. It's Championship Week Tuesday, and I can't even keep track of my days. Real quick, I want to hit the Pac-12 before we head out because everybody who claims to be a college basketball expert has bet USC in some capacity to win the Pac-12. I believe 40-1 was the number as they foul the 3-point shooter. Nice job, NC State. USC. It's down to 20-1 now. I don't think they're going to get past Arizona. I've convinced myself of that.
Yeah, I think you're probably better off just betting them like plus 380 or whatever it'll be against Arizona in that game and holding off and betting them tomorrow against Washington, which I am doing. I like them against Washington -1. It almost scares me that the line's not a bit higher, but I guess Vegas has to take some account into how bad USC was for a large stretch of the season. USC did just beat Washington in Washington, so ring that bell for a trend I like in the conference tournaments. But they're 4-1 in the last 5 straight up and against the spread. So give me Bronny's USC fighting Trojans.
Washington, by the way, fired coach. That's also something to keep into perspective here. A fired coach, dead team walking with Washington. Not the case with Missouri. And by the way, they'll hit all 3 free throws. That kind of speaks to how everything is going. Credit to them. They're still trapping, though. Then who knows what could happen to college basketball, but it looks pretty dead. I'm on you with USC tomorrow against Washington. They're playing really good basketball. I think they'll at least get another shot at Arizona, but I think beating Arizona on Saturday night was the worst thing for USC. I think it's going to motivate. No, game didn't matter to Arizona. Now they're motivated. Now they have a trophy in front of them in the Pac-12 tournament. Potential 1 seed still maybe, depending on how Tennessee does. I think the 1 seed line is really dependent on what Tennessee does. I think it's Tennessee and North Carolina. I'm selfish because I have Carolina plus 750 to be a 1 seed. So I'm going to root like heck against Tennessee this week. But
Tennessee's 7-6 in the quad 1. UNC is a better team than Tennessee. I'm sorry, but North Carolina should be the 1 seed as of right now.
Thank you. I appreciate that. But yeah, USC I think is a team to for sure bet tomorrow. There are a lot of bad teams that are going to be on the court tomorrow. Teams that get hot, like a USC worth looking at. Like you said, Georgia. I think we both might be on St. Joe's as well. Going through the board tomorrow, one last look. Anything else that has your interest? I think we're both on USC. We're both on VCU. This is bad. Somebody fade us. Temple's in action, but they're kind of irrelevant. LaSalle
they might be rigging the game, so who knows?
LaSalle put up a stinker today and barely escaped against GW. They play the Bonnie tomorrow. They're a 6-point dog. Like I said, there's 2 heavy favorites in the Big East. Anything else that has your attention tomorrow?
2 dart throws. I like Butler +1 against Xavier for not much more than I think Butler's a better team. Not much there. Not a huge play. I like the over at 145.5 in Arizona State, Utah at 11:30 at night. A little late night Pac-12 network. I have so many bets on the Pac-12 network tomorrow that it's a little bit frustrating. I think I might have said that number wrong. It's actually at 144.5, not 145.5.
Arizona State might be a dead team walking too.
They definitely might be. Both these teams they've played twice. The number has been at 1 162 and 152. And we're getting the number here at 145.5. At 11:30, I think the defense is going to be minimal in this game. So give me the over there. And then another Pac-12 over. Half of my bets tomorrow are just overs, 4 of my 8 bets. But I like the over at 127.5 in Oregon State UCLA. And I know like neither of these teams are juggernauts offensively. I know this one's gross a little bit. But you look at these two teams, how they matched up earlier in the year. The game did get to 132, went well over the 125.5 total, and that wasn't even in a close game. I think this could be a close game. I would lean UCLA at the 6.5, but could be a close game, which would only help the over. You look at the total as of late, UCLA has been they're 3-1 to the over in the last 4 games. Oregon State 5-1 to the over in the last 6 games, and these overs that are generally playing are in the 120s. It's not like they're hitting 150, but I think this number is just a bit too low.
I would bet Utah tomorrow at -6. I forgot to mention this. Arizona State's one of their top players, Perez, left the team on Saturday. They're a dead team walking. Utah still has a little bit of life around the bubble. So Utah -6. I would probably take them up to 10. Arizona State. Hurley might get fired.
He'll do a good job as UConn's lead assistant next year.
Or DePaul as head coach.
Oof, that's gross for DePaul if you do that. That's gross.
By the way, to end this on a sour note, Louisville got within the 10. NC State won by 9.
I hate those big numbers. I can't do it.
So that will wrap up any bets we have tonight, except for Charleston because got them yesterday. But yes, we went through plenty of plays between futures and tomorrow's card. It's nice to have a light slate to get in front of tomorrow's card as well. For Mark Henry Jr., I am Joe Tansey.
Wait, I forgot. Nebraska Cornhuskers. That's my favorite
right.
Big Ten. It's my favorite feature in the whole thing. I forgot to mention the whole thing. I put 3 units on it because I found it also at a really good number. Let me tell you exactly what that number was because I lost it. I think it's at 10-1 or 11-1. But Nebraska, I love how the bracket broke out for them. You get an Indiana team probably that I don't necessarily feel very good about what Indiana is. I know they've been playing better lately. Then you get one of Illinois, Iowa, and neither of those teams play defense, and Nebraska can fill it up offensively. They also have beaten both of those teams. Then, obviously on the other side, you hope someone beats Purdue, but Nebraska did beat Purdue by 16. So it's not like impossible for Nebraska to beat Purdue. I love Nebraska. It's my favorite feature of conference tournament week. I did also sprinkle Ohio State 36-1. They've been hot since they fired Holtman. The team allegedly hated him. So maybe Ohio State. If I had to pick one team across all the 6 major conferences to be the team that's a bid stealer, it would be Ohio State, not USC.
Look at you, Mark Henry Jr. Throwing out the dart at the end. Yeah, we would have been very bad. I would have been a very bad co-host if I didn't mention Nebraska for you. That's on.
I forgot. That's totally my fault. I should have put in like the main thing I wanted to talk about.
We could have put it in like the headlines: Nebraska in all caps. Cool. So anyway, we will be back tomorrow. Myself and John Jansen with the college basketball preview tomorrow, looking ahead to Thursday and on Wednesday night's game. So we'll get a fresh perspective. I think, Mark, are you back Thursday?
Yeah.
Thursday. Potentially Ryan Coyle as well with some 3-way action as well on Thursday. And after Selection Sunday, after you get your bracket, Sunday night we'll be live as well to break down everything and anything bracket-wise. There's one person around here that you want to trust with your bracket. It's Mark Henry. Mr. Miami last year. Don't sell yourself short.
I haven't gotten a champion in a couple of years, but we've had some good runs.
We've gotten some very big hits. So stay tuned on Sunday. We'll have plenty of stuff throughout the week as well next week, leading you up to March Madness. For Mark Henry Jr., I am Joe Tansey. Best of luck on your plays tonight, and we will see you guys tomorrow.